I live downwind from the Phillips 66 refinery. So how does the processing of Canadian tar sands and fracked oil affect our particular refinery? Well, the dirtier the oil, the dirtier the tar sands, the more propane and butane can be extracted. So Phillips 66 has sort of been on a stealth campaign to have a propane and butane operation in place so that it can ship those products to China. It's not going to be used here. It's going to be shipped to China. Now, as an activist, I just want to let you know that I'm a relative newcomer to the Crockett and Rodeo community. I stand on the shoulders of Marina and other people. Now, Crockett, our little town, is a quirky little town, very, very tight, and very, very proactive. And it wasn't very long after I arrived that I was told about the refinery and the issues surrounding the refinery, and it's basically a very long, shaky relationship with the towns of Rodeo, Crockett, and the little teeny town of Port Costa. Now, over the years, I've attended many refinery outreach meetings, and the standard dry presentations to our world-weary towns are now peppered with rosy euphemisms like, "Safety is their northern star." And that's coupled with dark and dire warnings that the refinery is fighting for its economic life. Now, for us who are from Crockett and Rodeo and have been dealing with Phillips 66 for years, I actually find that last part is kind of, it's amusing, because Phillips 66 continues to make record profits, pays no federal income tax, and it proudly sponsored political campaigns to defeat I'm so mad I'm spitting. It sponsored 2 political campaigns to defeat 2 school bond measures because it didn't want to pay more taxes. So when the refinery refused to renew our Good Neighbor Agreement, now I have to tell you about the Good Neighbor Agreement. It was a document that forced the refinery to pay large sums of money to the community, both Rodeo and Crockett, after the refinery 19 years ago deliberately released catacarbs into the air, deadly catacarbs into the air, for 2 weeks and didn't tell anybody. There was a period 4 years ago where they were supposed to renew the Good Neighbor Agreement. It was voluntary, and they volunteered not to renew it. Yeah. And ironically enough, it began to reframe the past payments to the community as charity. So these guys are not good neighbors, that's for sure. Now, to be sure, there is a kernel of truth about the industry being sort of on the economic ropes. Not now, mind you, but soon they will be. Sustainable, renewable energy is pretty soon is going to be cheaper than fossil fuels. And in fact, that's already the case in Massachusetts, according to a recent Boston Globe article. And it's my understanding that the petrochemical industry knows that they have about 20, 30 years max before the extraction methods are so costly and renewable energy becomes so cheap that fossil fuels will be nudged out of first place. So this has led to an industry-wide recklessness, yes, which is evidence in our local refineries today. it's sort of a grab what you can, no matter what the risks are kind of mentality. Now, some samples are Chevron, not replacing aging pipes as a shutdown would cut into profits. And instead they apparently elected to clamp corrosive pipes together. It's sort of like my dad, who used to use duct tape to keep our family station wagon together. It's bad.
Except it doesn't blow up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, Phillips 66R refinery this year is not telling the surrounding communities in its draft EIR for its propane expansion project exactly what the dangers are, which is this. When a propane sphere has a big accident, it's not the stuff that people in Richmond and Crockett and Rodeo, we all are familiar, we're all familiar with flaring, smelly air and fires. When a propane sphere blows up, it has been likened to a thermonuclear bomb. And the refinery is on the northwest edge of a little teeny town. There is a Head Start Center 1,300 meters away. The Rodeo water treatment plant only 900 meters away. The refinery didn't even give the water treatment plant a draft EIR to review. And they are considered the closest fence line receptors, and that's refinery speak for civilians. Now, besides, and let me kind of break down just put it away. This is not the Oscars, Charlie. Oh, we're kidding. Let me kind of break down the explosion process. There first is a big, huge fireball. Now, if you're in that fireball radius zone, you basically become ash. That's, you're a shadow on the sidewalk. And then beyond that, there are two percussive air blast zones, okay? The first percussive air blast zone that's closest to the fireball radius, the kind of devastation is this. Concrete buildings collapse, and there's 100% fatality. Now, you would think that the fatality figures would come from being hit by concrete buildings, but no, not necessarily the case. There is something about these huge thermonuclear blasts. The air that pushes out and then sucks back in is so strong that it fills up your lungs and pops them like balloons. I talked to a Cal OSHA guy and he called it, the dead zone. Mm-hmm. Well, the refinery hasn't told us who's going to be in the dead zone and who's not. There's a second percussive air blast zone where fatalities aren't 100% certain, but they will be very, very high, and most concrete buildings will collapse. People in Texas and Louisiana are very familiar with fireball, percussive air blast zones, are used to propane and butane being processed. British Petroleum, they have a refinery down in Texas. They had a huge propane explosion, and it killed contract workers who were working in a trailer. Wasn't the fireball that killed them. It was the percussive air blast zone. So it's of great concern to us. Our elementary school that serves 3 towns is about a mile away as the bird flies. And they just haven't been able to articulate the words explosion or fireball. And we're still waiting. Oh, and by the way, it's coming up in front of the county for the Planning Commission for a final approval, unchanged. Another example, Another example of this carelessness and making money at any cost is citing much of the propane construction in a liquefaction zone. It didn't even put in a liquefaction map into the draft EIR. That's another word they can't pronounce, liquefaction. So, so even if, and I have a neighbor who is a retired Chevron firefighter, and I mentally unpacked this. We had one of those front porch conversations, and this is what he told me. He said, you know, even if the storage tanks were actually in the liquefaction zone, were actually anchored by bedrock, the propane is actually going to be transported in pipes, you know, sort of like that size. And the pipes are actually going to be connected to railroad cars that are going to be in the liquefaction zone. All the rail lines are in a liquefaction zone. The expanded loading dock in a liquefaction zone. So if there's an earthquake, and we're up there, you know, about 7 miles from the top part of the Hayward Fault. If there's an earthquake, those pipes are going to shake. The spheres may be fine, but those pipes are going to shake. And if they shake, they may break. If the propane falls on the ground, what happens with propane is it becomes this cloud. Whether it's on ground or in the water, it's a cloud, and the edge of it is seeking a ignition source. If it goes into the water and it's right next to the water, that cloud may find its ignition source from a passing ship. If it goes on the ground, that cloud may find its ignition source from iron-on-iron contact. You know, trains on tracks, shaking. So it ignites, and then the fire goes backwards to its source, to the propane spheres. Now, they're going to be pressurized, and supposedly they're not supposed to explode, but I'm zipping through. They're not supposed to explode, except that we know, we have learned that over and over and over again, all around the world, perfect storms are created of human error, bad, old, malfunctioning units online to increase the bottom line, and catastrophic events. And floods do occur, and when they do happen, when these perfect storms happen, hundreds of people are killed, and surrounding communities slowly turn into undesirable ghost towns. Now, you would think that the county would protect our interests. No, there is this sweet spot between refineries and Contra Costa County. They need each other. and time and time again, we find ourselves wondering whose interests are they serving? Are they serving the public interests or the interests of the refinery? So I'm almost done, Charlie. You'll be so happy to know. This concern was deepened, needless to say, when we learned that the refinery's recently retired manager was appointed to the Contra Costa County's Planning Commission a few months ago. Anyway, so I want to wrap up and make Charlie happy. We all need each other in this global Davy and Goliath struggle. We need the scientists, we need the environmental lawyers, principals, policymakers, labor unions, and a sea of outspoken community activists who can write letters, speak at public hearings, talk to neighbors, and participate in demonstrations. And let's fight hard, and let's fight to win.